Our learning target is, I can write the equation for a line using slope-intercept form. Let's go ahead and review what slope-intercept form is. You hear it as y equals mx plus b, where the m, we call it the coefficient of x, represents the growth of a line. We call that slope, rise over run, or change in y over change in x. The y-intercept, which is b, also is represented as the starting value for y when x is equal to 0. Let's go ahead and look at a representation of a line that's in slope-intercept form, and let's go ahead and look at the graph that correlates with it. If I have a rule that's in slope-intercept form, y equals 2/3 x minus 1, the 2/3 is multiplied by x, so I know that's the slope, 2 over 3. The y-intercept, or the b, is a -1. So if I look at how that rule is graphed, the line touches the y-axis at -1 because that is my y-intercept, and my slope is 2/3. Again, rise of 2, run of 3. Change in y over change in x. We're going to look at how to write rules in slope-intercept form using other representations other than graphs. Today, let's go ahead and review one more time how to do that from a graph. Here are two graphs. I have one on the left, e at x. This is written in function notation, so that means this line is named e, and this line, f at x, is named f. We're going to go ahead and take a look at the first one. Here, if I wanted to write the rule for this line, I need to find two things. If you remember, the slope and the y-intercept. So if I take a look at this graph, the line touches the y-axis at 1. I'm going to go ahead and write that in. The y-intercept here is 0, 1. Then what I want to do is identify what the slope is. So I'm going to pick on the line some ordered pairs that are already plotted. I have 4 of them here. I'm going to go ahead and just choose 2. And what I'm going to do is identify what the rise over the run is for this line. I'm going to take my pen and I'm going to go up and over, and I'm going to go up and over to identify what my rise and run is. My rise is 1, my run is 2. So when I write my ratio of rise over run, I'm going to write it as 1 over 2. Now I have enough information to write my rule in slope-intercept form, and my rule would be y equals 1/2 x plus 1. I'm going to go ahead and look at the rule for line f. I'm going to do the same strategy, look for the y-intercept and the slope. The y-intercept right here is -3. The slope, I'm going to pick 2 points on the line, and I'm going to identify the rise and the run. Go ahead and start at this point. I'm going to go down and over, down and over. And what I'm going to do is label. Now if you notice, this line went upward. This line is going downward from left to right. So my rise is actually going to be a -2, and my run is a 1. So when I write my rule, I'll write it. Let me go ahead and put in the slope. -2 over 1, and my y-intercept is -3. I'll take these two parts and put them together for the rule. Y equals -2 over 1x minus 3. If I wanted to, I could also reduce or simplify -2 over 1 and just write y equals -2x minus 3. So the most important part when we're looking at a graph is how do I identify what the y-intercept is, where the line touches the y-axis, and then also the last part is to find the slope. Starting from one ordered pair on the line, going up and over if the line was positive, doing my rise and run, or if my line was negative, going down and over to the right to identify rise over run, and then writing the rule. Next we're going to look at how do I write a rule in slope-intercept form from a table. So if I look at table number 1, all my x values are in consecutive order. They start off at 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. And my y values are listed here below. I still want to be able to do the same thing as what I did with my graphs. I want to identify my slope and my y-intercept. So I'm going to first look for something that's really important. Because I can't see where the line touches the y-axis because I don't have a picture of the graph, what I'm going to do is find out What is y when x is 0? And I can see that right here. So I'm going to tell you right now, when x is 0, my y value represents my y-intercept. So I'm going to go ahead and label that as my b. To find my slope, I still want to find change in y over change in x. My change in y, if I go from 2 to 5, I'm increasing by 3. If I go from 5 to 8, I'm increasing by 3. And from 8 to 11, increasing by 3. And if you notice, my change in x's, I'm increasing by 1s. So if I was going to write my slope, I'm going to write it as m equals, it would be change in y, which is 3, that's my rise. And I'm going to go ahead and put it over 1. When I go to write my rule, I would do exactly what I did with my graphs. I would write y equals 3 over 1x, and I would put minus 1 because that's my y-intercept. Just remember, anytime that you have a fraction as a slope, you're more than welcome to reduce or simplify. I could also write that as y equals 3x minus 1. Okay. The next thing that I'm going to do is take a look at my second table. If you look at the second table, my x values are not in numerical order. And like number 1, I do not have a y value for when x is 0, so I have to find it. What I'm going to do first is start off with my slope. I'm going to pick any 2 points since I know this is a linear relationship, and I'm going to find the slope. Change in y, I'm going to pick 2 numbers that are somewhat close together. I'm going to go ahead and pick 5 and 3. So I'm going to do change in y. If I go from 27 to 27 to 17, I'm decreasing by 10. My change in x, if I go from 5 to 3, I'm decreasing by 2. What I would do is write my slope, m equals change in y, which is negative 10, over change in x, which is negative 2. If I can simplify it, I want to go ahead and do that. Negative 10 divided by negative 2 means the same as 5. So that's my slope. Now if I know that my growth or my slope is 5, I should be able to find out what is y when x is 0. So if I look, I have an x value of 1 in my table. If I put a 0 here in my table and I extended it, if I'm at 5, if I'm at 7 and I'm supposed to be increasing by 5, moving off to the right, then I should decrease by 5 to get what my y-intercept is. So if my growth is positive 5 and I work backwards in a table, I want to decrease or subtract that value. So if I'm at 7 and I take away 5, I will have 2. Let's just make sure and double check that we're all on the same page. If I go from 2 to 7, I'm increasing by 5, making sure that that slope is okay, and now I have my y-intercept. So what I'm going to do, this is my slope, I'm going to just go ahead and label this that this is b, that's my y-intercept where the line touches the y-axis, and I'm going to write my rule. Y equals 5x plus 2. And that's my rule in slope-intercept form. Let's go ahead and look at one last representation, and that's when I have 2 points. So I have 2 lines here, and these 2 lines, line Z and line G, I only know 2 points to represent this relationship. I wanted to let you know I wrote the points in black, and in green, I just happened to write those points in function notation. So just so you know, the point 5, negative 1, if you see it in function notation, it just means Z at 5 is equal to negative 1. This 5 means that that's our x value, and the negative 1 is our y value. These are fancy ways to write ordered pairs. But the nice thing is, if I use that function notation, I know what line I'm looking for. When I go to do this problem, I need to find out specifically my slope and my y-intercept again. I know that my y-intercept already is given to me right here. And I know that because I have when x is 0. And anytime I see when x is 0, that gives me the y-intercept. The next thing I need to find is my slope. So I have to find the change in y over the change in x. So watch how I do this. If I go from negative 1, which is my y value here, and I go to negative 5, I have to think about what the change is. So if I go from negative 1 to negative 5, I'm decreasing by 4. And my change in y is negative 4, or my rise. If I go for my x's here, 5 and 0, if I go from 5 to 0, I'm decreasing by 5. So I'm going to put that here, change in x. Now, if I could simplify this, I can't simplify the numerical values, but I can simplify two negatives to make that a positive. So my slope here is 4 over 5. If I know my y-intercept is already -5, then I will go ahead and write my rule. Y equals 4 over 5 x minus 5. Let's go ahead and try line G. I'm going to still go ahead and take a look. Do I have my y-intercept? I do not have a value for y when x is 0. I don't see 0 here for the x's. So I'm going to go ahead and start with my slope. Change in y, if this is x and y, my change in y from -2 to 0 is adding 2. So it's a +2 for my change in y. And if I go from 3 to 5, which is my change in x, I'm also increasing by 2. If I want to reduce this value, 2 over 2 means 1. So I know my growth is 1. But now I have to be able to find out what my y-intercept is. So I'm going to take 1 point here. I'm going to pick 3 for my x value because 3 is close, it's as close as I can get to 0. I'm going to go ahead and make a little table down below. And I'm going to put 3, -2 in my table. I'm going to go ahead and add 2, 1, and 0. This is the one that we want. So if I know I'm growing by 1, going off to the right, then I should decrease by 1 to get my y-intercept. So if I take away 1 from -2, it should be -3. Take away 1 from -3, I would get -4. And if I take away 1 from -4, I should get -5. And there's my y-intercept. So my rule for this problem would be y equals 1x minus 5. Now I'm going to give you some practice problems to do. I'm going to go ahead and show you the problems. What I'd like you to do after you see the problems, I'd like you to pause. And then once you're done, I'd like you to hit unpause to see the solutions. Go ahead and pause. Okay, now that we're back, we're going to go ahead and check our solution. So let's go ahead and write our rule from a graph. So my y-intercept here, if this is 2, 3, 4, my y-intercept is 4. My slope is -1 over 3. And my y-intercept is 4. So when I write my rule should be y equals -1 over 3x plus 4. Make sure that you didn't forget your negative sign in front of that slope. Okay, let's go ahead and look at our solution from a table. So if I look at this one, I have my y-intercept right away. This is our b because I know my y value when x is 0. My change in y is 3, and my change in x is 1. So my slope, is 3 over 1, and my y-intercept I know is -1, so my rule would be y equals 3 over 1x minus 1. And remember, you could always say that that's 3. We're going to go ahead and take the solution for this one. So line number 3, my change in y from -1 to 5 is 6. This is our slope. My change in x from 1 to -1 is decreasing by 2, so my slope is -3. Just remember, I want to be able to find my y-intercept. So if I know the value for x when it's 1, what I could do is make a small table, or I could do it from the ordered pair. If I put 1, -1 in, if I know I'm supposed to decrease by 3 going off to the right as my x values are increasing, then I would increase by 3 going the opposite way. So when x is 0, I would add 3 to this and I would have a value of 2. My y-intercept is 2 and my slope is -3. -3x minus 1. Oh, excuse me, I'm sorry, plus 2. That's right here. And then for this rule down here, my y-intercept is already provided. So my rule would be y equals, my y-intercept is 3. My slope would be an increase of 5 over my increase of x, which is 2. So it would be 5 over 2x plus 3. Thank you.